Eleanor Chen rubbed her tired eyes as she made her way down the narrow aisle of the Boeing 737. The blue glow of seat numbers guided her path until she found 20D, a window seat halfway down the plane. She hoisted her carry-on into the overhead bin, keeping her laptop bag close as she settled into her seat. "Just made it," she mumbled to herself, checking her watch. The morning had been a blur of handshakes, questions, and polite applause after her presentation at MIT. 10 years of research, squeezed into a 40-minute talk for people who mostly just wanted to know if they could make money from her work. A young man in a rumpled suit took the aisle seat beside her. He smiled briefly before plugging in earphones and disappearing into his phone screen. Eleanor was grateful for the lack of small talk. The space between them remained empty, a small mercy on the packed flight from Boston to Washington, D.C. As other passengers filed in, Eleanor pulled out her laptop. The screen lit up to display complex lines of code she'd been tweaking earlier that morning. She hadn't meant to work during her presentation, but inspiration had struck while answering a student's question, and she'd scribbled notes on the back of her hand in blue pen. Now those ink marks were smudged but still readable, possible fixes for the reaction time lag in her navigation system. The flight attendant's voice crackled over the intercom, reciting the familiar safety instructions. Eleanor half listened while typing rapidly, trying to capture her thoughts before they slipped away. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, but she ignored it. Probably just Tom from the lab asking how the presentation went, or maybe her sister calling about weekend plans. It could wait. The plane began to taxi, and Eleanor reluctantly closed her laptop as requested. She leaned back, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt. The last 3 weeks had been a marathon of all-nighters and coffee-fueled coding sessions to perfect her demonstration. Her AI navigation system was finally working with 98.7% accuracy in simulated environments. Not perfect, but revolutionary compared to existing systems. "Dr. Chen?" Eleanor opened her eyes, not realizing she had dozed off. A flight attendant was leaning over the man next to her, holding out a note. "Sorry to disturb you, but this message was relayed to the cockpit for you." Confused, Eleanor took the folded paper. Inside was a typed message. "Upon landing, please proceed directly to the black SUV that will be waiting at Gate C, Department of Defense matter. Urgent. Colonel Richardson." Eleanor frowned. She had expected the military to show interest eventually. Her system could revolutionize autonomous vehicles, including military ones, but she hadn't anticipated such dramatics. The academic world moved at its own pace, with proper channels and scheduled meetings, not mysterious notes on airplanes. She handed the note back to the flight attendant. "There must be some mistake." "I don't know any Colonel Richardson. The message came through official channels, ma'am. The captain verified it." Eleanor sighed, taking the note back. "Fine, thank you." As the plane reached cruising altitude, she pulled out her phone to check her messages. 3 missed calls from an unknown number with a DC area code. A text message simply read, "Dr. Chen, critical situation involving your navigation system. Please respond ASAP. Department of Defense." "Unbelievable," she muttered. The DoD had shown interest in her work 6 months ago, sending representatives to observe her early demonstrations. She had politely but firmly declined their offers of funding, knowing it would come with strings attached: classified research, restricted publications, and military applications she wasn't comfortable with. She had developed her system to help self-driving cars navigate complex environments, to make space exploration safer, to guide rescue robots through disaster zones, not to power weapons or war machines. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. "This is not about recruitment. Your expertise needed for emergency situation." Eleanor stared at her phone, her heart beating faster. What kind of emergency would require her specific expertise? She had only finished the working prototype 3 months ago, and as far as she knew, nobody outside her lab had implemented it yet. She typed back, "What kind of emergency involves a theoretical navigation system?" The response came quickly. "Not theoretical anymore. We'll explain upon landing. Lives at stake." Eleanor felt a chill run down her spine. Her system wasn't ready for real-world deployment yet. The algorithms were sound, but they needed more testing, more refinement. If someone had rushed her work into production, "Can I get you anything to drink?" The flight attendant's cheerful voice broke through her thoughts. "Just water, please." Eleanor replied, trying to mask her growing concern. As the flight attendant moved on, Eleanor pulled out her laptop again, ignoring the seatbelt sign. She needed to review her code, to understand what might be happening. If someone had implemented her system prematurely and people were now in danger because of it, she needed to be prepared. Her hands moved rapidly over the keyboard, pulling up simulation models and test scenarios she had run hundreds of times. The code was elegant but complex, a neural network designed to make split-second decisions based on thousands of environmental inputs. It could navigate through storms, around obstacles, even predict the movements of other vehicles nearby. But it had weaknesses too, edge cases she hadn't fully solved yet. The man beside her glanced over curiously but said nothing. People were used to seeing intense-looking women typing furiously on laptops these days, especially on flights to Washington. She could have been a lawyer preparing for a case, a journalist chasing a deadline, or exactly what she was, a scientist trying to understand how her creation might be putting lives at risk. An hour into the flight, her phone buzzed again. This time it was an email marked urgent from an address she didn't recognize. PRichardsonDefense.gov. The email was brief. Dr. Chen, 3 F-22 Raptor aircraft are currently testing a prototype based on your navigation system. 30 minutes ago, they experienced a critical system failure that has compromised all standard communication and navigation. Your system is partially operational but requires expert guidance. Upon landing, you will be escorted to Andrews Air Force Base. Preparations are being made for you to remotely assist the pilots. Please review the attached technical specifications before landing. Eleanor's hands trembled as she downloaded the attachment. F-22 Raptors. Fighter jets. Someone had adapted her system for military aircraft without her knowledge or consent, and now pilots' lives were at risk. The attachment contained schematics showing how her system had been integrated into the F-22's existing navigation framework. It wasn't a complete replacement, that would have taken years of testing, but a supplementary system designed to take over if primary systems failed. Except now everything had failed except her experimental code, which was running on minimal power with no interface designed for human pilots. "This is insane," she whispered to herself, earning another curious glance from her seatmate. Eleanor lost track of time as she studied the schematics, mentally tracing the connections between her system and the aircraft controls. Her work had never been meant for this. Her algorithms were designed for ground vehicles moving at highway speeds, not supersonic jets performing complex aerial maneuvers. The military engineers had made impressive adaptations, but they'd cut corners, skipped safeguards she would have insisted upon. The captain's voice suddenly came over the intercom, unusually tense. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have a somewhat unusual request. If there are any passengers on board with military aviation experience or advanced expertise in artificial intelligence navigation systems, please identify yourselves to a flight attendant immediately. This is not a drill or a joke." A murmur ran through the cabin. Eleanor felt as though all the air had been sucked from her lungs. She raised her hand and a flight attendant quickly approached. "I'm Dr. Eleanor Chen," she said quietly. "I think I'm the person you're looking for." The flight attendant's professional composure slipped for just a moment, relief washing over her face. "Please come with me, Dr. Chen. Bring your laptop." As Eleanor gathered her things, the man beside her finally spoke. "Good luck with whatever this is," she nodded, not knowing what to say. How could she explain that 3 pilots' lives now depended on code she'd written in her university lab? Code that was never meant to fly a plane. Following the flight attendant toward the front of the aircraft, Eleanor took deep breaths trying to calm her racing thoughts. She had never expected her work to be used like this. She had never wanted it to be. But right now, none of that mattered. 3 pilots were in trouble, and somehow, from seat 20D of a commercial flight, she was going to have to help them. The flight attendant led Eleanor to the front of the plane, past curious passengers who craned their necks to watch her pass. Some whispered to each other, wondering what was happening. At the galley area near first class, a tall man in civilian clothes stood waiting. Despite his casual blue button-down and khakis, everything about him screamed military. The ramrod straight posture, the close-cropped gray hair, the calculating look in his eyes as he assessed her. "Dr. Chen," he said, extending his hand. "Colonel James Reeves, United States Air Force. Thank you for responding so quickly." Eleanor shook his hand. noticing the firm grip and the tension around his eyes. "What exactly is going on, Colonel?" "Your message mentioned F-22s using my navigation system, which should be impossible. My work is still experimental." The colonel glanced at the flight attendant. "We need some privacy. Is there somewhere we can talk?" "We've cleared the front row of first class," the attendant replied. "The captain has informed the passengers that we're handling a technical emergency and asked for their cooperation." Reeves nodded and gestured for Eleanor to follow him. As they walked, he kept his voice low. 3 months ago, the Air Force began Project Nighthawk, adapting civilian AI technologies for emergency backup systems in fifth-generation fighter aircraft. Your navigation system was selected for its ability to make independent decisions in complex environments without my knowledge or permission, Eleanor said sharply. "The Pentagon acquired the rights through your university's technology transfer office." Reeves replied, his tone matter-of-fact. "I understand your concerns, but right now we have a more pressing problem." They reached the first-class cabin where the front row had indeed been cleared. A makeshift workstation had been set up with what looked like military-grade communications equipment that definitely hadn't been on the plane when it departed Boston. "How did you get all this on board?" Eleanor asked, gesturing to the equipment. "We didn't. The captain and first officer assembled it from components in the onboard emergency kit and passengers' electronics. We've got people who know how to improvise." A younger man in a rumpled suit stood from where he'd been hunched over a laptop. His ID badge identified him as Dr. Liam Winters, DOD. "Is this her? The navigation specialist?" Reeves nodded. "Dr. Chen, this is Dr. Winters from the Pentagon's Emerging Technology Division. He's been overseeing Project Nighthawk." Winters didn't offer to shake hands, instead turning the laptop to face her. 3 F-22 Raptors took off from Andrews Air Force Base at 0900 hours for a routine test flight of your navigation system. At 0942, they experienced a cascading system failure that knocked out their primary navigation, communications, and most of their instrumentation. On the screen, Eleanor saw a map with 3 blinking dots moving in a holding pattern over what appeared to be rural Virginia. "How are you tracking them if communications are down?" she asked. "Your system is still running," Winters explained. "It's the only thing that is. When the primary systems failed, power was rerouted to maintain your AI navigation module because it was designed to function independently. It's sending a basic telemetry signal that we can track, but we can't communicate with it through normal channels." Eleanor's mind raced. The emergency backup protocol. It wasn't meant for actual deployment, just for testing the system's resilience. "Exactly," Reeves said. "But right now it's all we've got. Those pilots are flying blind. Their instruments are dark, radio dead. The only functioning system is your navigation module, which is keeping them in a holding pattern, but fuel is becoming a concern." Eleanor set down her laptop and opened it. "My system includes a rudimentary communication protocol for debugging purposes. If you can establish a direct link to the planes, I might be able to send basic commands." "That's what we were hoping," Winters said. "We've got a satellite uplink established through the plane's communication system. But we need your authentication code to access the debug interface." Eleanor's fingers froze over her keyboard. "You want me to take control of 3 fighter jets from a commercial airplane?" "Not control," Reeves clarified. "Guide. The pilots are still at the stick, but they have no instruments, no navigation. Your system is currently keeping them from crashing, but it can't land the planes. We need you to be their eyes and ears until they can get to a safe landing zone." Eleanor took a deep breath. This system wasn't designed for this. It was meant for self-driving cars, maybe someday rescue drones, not supersonic fighter jets. "Yet here we are," Winters said impatiently. 3 pilots' lives depend on your code right now. Are you going to help or not?" A flash of anger shot through Eleanor. "Don't try to make this my fault. I never intended—" "Nobody's blaming you," Reeves interrupted, shooting a warning glance at Winters. "But those pilots are running out of options and time. They've got maybe 45 minutes of fuel left." The captain appeared behind them. "Dr. Chen, we've been authorized to divert to Andrews Air Force Base if necessary, but we'd need to start that process now. Can you help these aircraft?" Eleanor looked at the expectant faces around her, and then at the screen showing the 3 fighter jets circling helplessly. Whatever her feelings about military applications of her work, 3 people were in danger because of something she had created. She couldn't walk away from that. I'll need a direct satellite link, as much bandwidth as you can give me, and someone who understands the F-22 systems to translate what I'm seeing, she said finally. Relief washed over Reeves's face. Thank you, Doctor. We have an F-22 pilot on video link standing by. The next 20 minutes were a blur of technical jargon and tense problem-solving. Eleanor's fingers flew over her keyboard, digging into code she knew intimately but now had to adapt on the fly. Winters worked beside her, relaying information from military personnel on the ground. The captain had informed the other passengers of the situation in vague terms, asking for their patience during the technical emergency. The authentication protocol requires a physical key that should be in my lab at MIT, Eleanor explained, frowning at her screen. But I think I can bypass it if we route through the system's original testing server. Will that work? Reeves asked. In theory. I designed the system with multiple redundancies, including the ability to revert to earlier verification protocols in case of emergency. She typed rapidly, her focus absolute. The military modifications to my code are extensive, but the core architecture is still mine. On a separate screen, a man in a flight suit was visible. Captain Brian Walsh, F-22 test pilot instructor, he introduced himself. I'm here to help translate what you're seeing into terms the pilots will understand. Eleanor nodded without looking up from her work. I'm going to need to know exactly how my system is integrated with their flight controls. The schematics I saw were incomplete. Classified information, Winters began, but Reeves cut him off. Not anymore. Give her everything she needs. Walsh began explaining, pointing to diagrams that appeared on his screen. Your navigation module was integrated here, with control pathways to these systems. The pilots can still manually control the aircraft, but they have no instruments, no radio, and no visual reference points in the clouds. Eleanor absorbed the information, making adjustments to her approach as she went. Her mind was fully engaged in the problem, the technical challenge pushing aside her ethical concerns for the moment. This was what she did best, solving impossible problems under pressure. I've found the back door, she announced after several tense minutes. Initiating connection to the first aircraft now. Everyone leaned closer as she executed the command. Lines of code scrolled rapidly across her screen. Connection established, she said, feeling a surge of nervous energy. I'm receiving telemetry data from the lead aircraft. Fuel at 38%. Altitude 30,000 feet, currently flying in circles at the direction of my emergency protocol. Can you communicate with the pilot? Reeves asked. Not directly, Eleanor replied. But I can send text commands that should appear on the auxiliary display if it's still functioning. She typed quickly. System reconnected. Identify status. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then new text appeared on her screen. Pilot alive, instruments dead, flying blind. Who is this? It worked, Eleanor breathed. The pilot can see my messages and respond. Reeves leaned over her shoulder. Tell him who you are and that help is coming. Eleanor typed, Dr. Eleanor Chen, navigation system designer, working to restore basic navigation and guide you to safe landing. The response came quickly. Good to meet you, Doc. Would prefer better circumstances. 2 wingmen still with me. Fuel becoming issue. I need to connect to the other aircraft, Eleanor said, already working on it. Then establish a navigation corridor to the nearest suitable airfield. Walsh provided the coordinates for Andrews Air Force Base. That's their best option, but they'll need precision guidance all the way in. Eleanor's fingers flew across her keyboard, translating complex navigational data into simple instructions the pilots could follow without their instruments. The first-class cabin had transformed into a makeshift command center, with passengers relocated to other parts of the plane. The flight attendants had hung blankets to create privacy and reduce screen glare. Military personnel on the ground, connected through the satellite uplink, waited for updates in tense silence. Raptor 1. Adjust heading 3 degrees north, Eleanor typed, watching as the lead F-22's flight path slowly changed on her screen. Raptor 2 and 3. Maintain current formation and follow one's lead. The response came back from Raptor 1. Copy that. Visibility 0 in cloud cover. Trusting your eyes, Doc, Eleanor felt the weight of those words. These pilots were putting their lives completely in her hands, trusting code she had written and instructions she was improvising on the fly. How are we doing on fuel? She asked Captain Walsh, who was still connected via video. All 3 aircraft are at approximately 34% capacity. They need to begin descent within the next 15 minutes to make Andrews safely. Reeves leaned over her shoulder. Are you confident you can guide them through the landing approach? That's the most critical phase. Eleanor took a deep breath. My system wasn't designed for landing procedures. It's meant to navigate between points, not perform precision maneuvers near the ground. She looked up at the concerned faces around her. But I think I can get them close enough for the pilots to take over visually once they're below the cloud cover. Dr. Winters paced nearby, his earlier hostility replaced by nervous energy. We need to decide on the approach path now. Andrews has cleared all other traffic, but there's a storm system moving in from the west. Eleanor pulled up weather data on a second screen provided by one of the flight attendants. The storm was building rapidly, with heavy rain and wind gusts already affecting areas west of Washington, D.C. Another complication. We'll need to bring them in from the east, she said, already calculating. But that means threading between restricted airspace over the Capitol and commercial traffic corridors from Baltimore. Walsh nodded on the video screen. It's tight but doable. I'm sending approach coordinates now. As the data appeared on her screen, Eleanor became aware of whispers behind her. Several passengers had gathered at the edge of the makeshift workspace, watching the drama unfold. The pilot of their commercial flight appeared beside Colonel Reeves. Dr. Chen were being instructed to divert to Andrews as well. Air traffic control wants us on the ground before the storm hits, and they want us available in case. He didn't finish the sentence, but everyone understood. In case the worst happened, Eleanor would need to be on the ground quickly. How long until we land? She asked, not looking up from her work. About 40 minutes. We've been given priority clearance. Eleanor nodded, still typing. I'll have the F-22s in position by then. But I need everyone to understand something. She finally looked up, making eye contact with Reeves, Winters, and Walsh in turn. I can get them to Andrews, but I've never guided a landing with this system. There are too many variables, too many things that could go wrong. The pilots are highly trained, Walsh assured her. Get them below the clouds with a clear approach path, and they can take it from there. A new message appeared from Raptor 3. Fuel warning light activated. System estimates 28 minutes remaining. That's not right, Eleanor said, frowning. The telemetry shows 33% fuel capacity. Walsh's expression grew concerned. The failure might be affecting their fuel systems. We need to treat this as the more urgent timeline. Eleanor nodded, her mind racing. I need to create a more direct approach path for Raptor 3. We can't risk having them in a holding pattern. That means bringing them over populated areas, Winters pointed out. At 25,000 feet, that's not an issue, Eleanor replied sharply. The alternative is having them flame out over those same areas. She began typing rapidly, creating a new navigation corridor for the troubled aircraft. As she worked, she became vaguely aware of passengers being asked to return to their seats and fasten their seatbelts. Their own plane was beginning its descent. I've got a new approach for Raptor 3, she announced. Direct path to Andrews, beginning descent now. She sent the commands, watching as the aircraft's flight path adjusted on her screen. Copy new approach. Beginning descent. Handling feels sluggish. That's not good, Walsh said over the video link. Ask how the control surfaces are responding. Eleanor relayed the question. The answer wasn't reassuring. Ailerons responding slowly. Might be hydraulic issue on top of everything else. The technical problems were mounting, pushing Eleanor's system beyond what it was designed to handle. She hadn't programmed for mechanical failures, just navigation challenges. I need to modify the control parameters for Raptor 3, she said, already diving into a section of code she hadn't planned to touch. The system is trying to make normal adjustments, but with sluggish controls it's overcompensating. Reeves looked to Walsh. Is that safe? Safer than leaving it as is, Walsh replied. If the system is fighting the mechanical issues, it could push the aircraft into a dangerous attitude. Eleanor barely heard them, her focus entirely on the code. She was making changes to systems controlling a $150 million aircraft with a human being inside, using a laptop on a commercial flight. The absurdity of the situation hit her suddenly, and she had to push it aside to maintain her concentration. Upload the modified parameters, she muttered to herself. Executing the command. New flight characteristics received. Handling feels more stable. Nice work, Doc. A small cheer went up from the group gathered around her. Eleanor allowed herself a moment of relief before turning her attention to the other two aircraft. Beginning descent sequence for Raptors 1 and 2, she announced, typing the commands. Standard approach path to Andrews, 10-mile separation between aircraft. The responses came in quickly. Raptor 1 beginning descent. Fuel at 30%. Raptor 2 following, all systems nominal except displays and comms. Eleanor checked their projected flight paths against the weather data. They would reach Andrews before the worst of the storm, but not by much. Raptor 3, with its mechanical issues and fuel concerns, was her biggest worry. I need a status update on Raptor 3, she typed. The response was delayed, causing a moment of panic before it appeared. Descent stable but fuel situation deteriorating. May not make Andrews. Eleanor felt her stomach drop. We need alternatives, she said to the group. What's the nearest airfield that could handle an F-22 emergency landing? Walsh was already pulling up a map. Patuxent River Naval Air Station is closer, but they're taking the brunt of the storm right now. Reagan National is possible, but it means flying directly over D.C., which needs special clearance. How about Martin State Airport near Baltimore? Eleanor suggested, spotting it on the map. It's got an 8,000-foot runway and should be ahead of the storm front. Walsh considered it. It's mostly used for Maryland Air National Guard, but yes, they could handle an emergency landing. I'll get clearance. Eleanor didn't wait, already calculating a new approach path for Raptor 3. I'm diverting Raptor 3 now. We can't risk waiting, she typed quickly. New landing site for Raptor 3. Martin State Airport near Baltimore. Sending approach coordinates now, copy. New destination. Never landed at Martin but willing to try anything once. Eleanor smiled despite the tension. The pilot's dark humor in the face of danger was oddly reassuring. These weren't just dots on her screen. They were people with lives and personalities, people depending on her. As their own plane descended through clouds, occasional turbulence jolting the cabin, Eleanor continued monitoring all three fighter jets. Raptors 1 and 2 were proceeding smoothly toward Andrews, now at 18,000 feet and descending on schedule. Raptor 3's situation was more precarious, its fuel gauge dropping faster than the system had predicted. We're 20 minutes out from our own landing, the commercial pilot informed them. How are your birds doing? Raptors 1 and 2 are on track, Eleanor replied. Raptor 3 is being diverted to Martin State with possible fuel and mechanical issues. A new message appeared from Raptor 3. Fuel at 15%. System estimates 12 minutes remaining. Might need to consider alternate options. Everyone knew what alternate options meant: ejection. It was safer than trying to land a fighter jet without fuel, but it still carried significant risks, not to mention the loss of a $150 million aircraft. Get me direct contact with Raptor 3's pilot, Eleanor said urgently. Winters looked confused. You already have text communication. It's too slow. I need voice communication if we're going to walk through emergency procedures. Reeves nodded to one of his team members who quickly worked with the communications equipment. We're piggybacking on the satellite phone system. It's not secure, but it should work. A moment later, a voice crackled through the speakers, filled with static but understandable. Raptor 3 to control. Do you read me? Their commercial plane had just touched down at Andrews Air Force Base, but Eleanor remained focused entirely on her laptop screen. The dot representing Raptor 3 was approaching Martin State Airport with critically low fuel. Runway lights had been activated despite the early afternoon hour, cutting through the gathering storm clouds to guide Lieutenant Cooper home. Raptor 3? Visual confirmation of runway? Eleanor asked through the satellite phone, her knuckles white around the handset. Affirmative. Cooper replied, his voice crackling with static. I can see it. Weather's getting rough, though. Crosswinds are going to make this interesting. Eleanor glanced at the weather data. The storm front was moving faster than predicted, already affecting the Baltimore area. What's your fuel status? 5% and dropping fast. It's going to be close. The commercial plane taxied to a stop, but nobody in the makeshift command center moved. Colonel Reeves spoke quietly to the captain, who nodded and announced over the intercom that deplaning would be delayed due to the ongoing emergency. Surprisingly, there were no complaints from the other passengers, many of whom had pieced together what was happening from snippets of conversation and the unusual flight diversion. Eleanor turned to Captain Walsh on the video screen. Talk me through an emergency approach for an F-22 with low fuel and crosswinds. Walsh nodded, his face grim. Cooper needs to maintain a steeper than normal approach to conserve fuel, but not so steep that he can't control the aircraft in the crosswinds. Your system needs to get him lined up perfectly with the runway, because he won't have power for a go-round if he misses. Eleanor's fingers flew over her keyboard, making real-time adjustments to the approach path. I'm modifying the glide slope now. Lieutenant Cooper, the system will adjust your approach angle. It might feel too steep, but trust it. Copy that. You haven't steered me wrong yet. Despite the life-threatening situation, Cooper's voice remained remarkably steady. 4% fuel. Beginning final approach. On a separate part of her screen, Eleanor watched the status of Raptors 1 and 2. They had descended below the cloud cover at Andrews and were preparing for their own landings, though their situations were far less critical. Raptors 1 and 2 reporting visual on the runway, Dr. Winters announced, reading from his own screen. They're proceeding with standard approach patterns. Eleanor nodded without taking her eyes off Raptor 3's data. The fighter jet was now just 2 miles from the runway at Martin State, descending through 2,000 feet. Its fuel indicator had dropped to 3%. How's it looking, Lieutenant? She asked, unable to keep the tension from her voice. Steep, just like you said, fighting the crosswinds, but I've got it. Your system is compensating beautifully. There was a pause. 2% fuel. Engine starting to sputter. Eleanor held her breath. The next minute would determine whether her modified navigation system and Lieutenant Cooper's piloting skills would be enough to bring the aircraft home safely. 1 mile to threshold, she reported, watching the distance indicator tick down. You're on perfect approach path. Keep following the system's guidance, roger that. I can see the runway clearly now. Wind gusting from the west, whoa. Eleanor's heart jumped as the aircraft symbol on her screen wobbled. What happened? Wind shear. Nearly pushed me off course, but your system corrected faster than I could have. Nicely done, Doc. She released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Stay with it. You're almost there. 1% fuel. Engine threatening to quit any second. Around Eleanor, everyone had fallen silent, watching the drama unfold. Even the other passengers on the commercial flight seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, the usual post-landing rustling and conversation absent from the cabin. 1/2 mile to threshold, Eleanor reported. Start your flare when the system indicates. Copy that. The line went silent for a moment. Engine just cut out. I'm gliding in. Eleanor's screen showed the aircraft's power dropping to 0, but its trajectory remained stable along the calculated glide path. Lieutenant Cooper was now flying a 28-ton glider with no second chances. The system will continue to guide you, she said, forcing her voice to remain calm. It's calculated your momentum and glide ratio. Just follow the indicated path. Following guidance. Runway threshold approaching. Beginning flare now. Eleanor watched as the altitude numbers ticked down rapidly. 200 feet. 50. 100. The aircraft symbol on her screen smoothly approached the runway. Come on, she whispered. 50 feet. 30. 10. Cooper's voice had the focused calm of a pilot executing a critical maneuver. Then suddenly, touchdown. Main gear on the runway. A cheer erupted in the makeshift command center. Colonel Reeves clapped his hands once, his military composure cracking just enough to show his relief. Dr. Winters slumped in his seat, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Nose gear down, Cooper continued. Rolling out. Speed bleeding off, and I'm clear of the active runway. Aircraft secure. Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, letting the tension flow out of her shoulders. 1 aircraft safe. 2 to go. Raptor 1 on final approach at Andrews. Came the update from Walsh. Raptor 2 in the pattern behind him. With Cooper safely on the ground at Martin State, Eleanor turned her full attention to the remaining aircraft. Their landings were less dramatic, with functioning engines and better weather conditions, but still challenging without normal instrumentation. Both aircraft are following the navigation guidance perfectly, she noted, watching their approach patterns. They should be fine as long as they maintain visual on the runway. 10 minutes later, Raptor 1 touched down smoothly on Andrews' main runway. 5 minutes after that, Raptor 2 joined it. All 3 F-22s and their pilots were safely on the ground. The relief in the cabin was palpable. Flight attendants began preparing for deplaning, while military personnel started gathering their equipment. Eleanor sat back in her seat, suddenly aware of how exhausted she felt. The adrenaline that had carried her through the crisis was fading, leaving her hands shaky and her mind foggy. "Dr. Chen," Colonel Reeves said, leaning down next to her seat, "I don't think I can fully express what you've accomplished today. Those pilots are alive because of you." Eleanor shook her head. "Because of them. They're the ones who flew the planes. With your guidance and your system." Reeves's expression was earnest. "What you did today, guiding 3 advanced fighter jets to emergency landings from a commercial airplane using experimental software, it's unprecedented." Before Eleanor could respond, her laptop chimed with an incoming message. It was from Lieutenant Cooper at Martin State Dock. "When they write the history of emergency landings, this one's going to need its own chapter. Thank you doesn't begin to cover it, but it's a start." "Thank you," Eleanor felt a lump in her throat as she typed back. "You did the hard part. I just provided the directions. Best backseat driver I've ever had. Hope to meet you in person someday." When we're both on the ground. A tap on her shoulder drew her attention away from the screen. A flight attendant stood there with a satellite phone. "Dr. Chen, the Secretary of Defense would like to speak with you." Eleanor blinked in surprise, taking the phone hesitantly. "This is Dr. Chen. Dr. Chen, this is Secretary Bellamy. I've been briefed on the situation. What you've managed to accomplish today is nothing short of extraordinary." "Thank you, Mr. Secretary, but I was just doing what needed to be done." "That's precisely what makes it extraordinary. I understand you had reservations about the military applications of your work." Eleanor hesitated, aware of Reeves and Winters listening nearby. "I still do, sir. My system was designed to save lives, not as a weapons platform. And today it saved 3 lives. I'd like to meet with you tomorrow to discuss the future of Project Nighthawk, with your input as a key component. We need minds like yours working on safety systems and fail-safes." As she hung up, Eleanor looked around at the people gathering their things to deplane. Regular people who had been on a regular flight that had suddenly become anything but regular. Some nodded to her with knowing looks. They had pieced together enough to understand her role in the drama. Others remained oblivious, irritated by the delay and unaware that history had been made around them. Dr. Winters approached awkwardly, his earlier hostility completely gone. I've never seen anything like that. The way you modified the system in real time, created that fuel-optimizing glide path for Cooper. We've been working with your code for months and couldn't have done that." Eleanor managed a tired smile. "That's because you were trying to adapt it for something it wasn't designed to do. Next time, maybe just ask me first?" He had the grace to look embarrassed. "That's fair. And after today, I think a lot of protocols are going to change." He offered his hand. "For what it's worth, I'm glad you were on this flight." As they finally began to deplane, Eleanor gathered her things slowly, her mind already racing ahead. The military had seen what her system could do in a crisis, which meant there would be even more interest in adapting it for defense purposes. But they had also seen its limitations and the need for her expertise.